Hello and welcome to Triads in Motion. In this new series, I'm going to look at the foundations of harmony on the guitar, the mighty triad. And I'm going to propose some exercises and some ways of thinking about harmonic motion on the instrument that may be new to you. This series is really great for people who ultimately want to compose or improvise in a contrapuntal style, and also for those who play the classical guitar repertoire and want a stronger underpinning in foundational harmony. I'm going to take an approach that I think is a little bit unique or original, although there's nothing too esoteric or special about it. The thing I think that is strong about the exercises I've laid out here is their thoroughness and the sort of logical approach to it. It all starts with our basic A minor triad. All of the exercises I'm going to show you in this video are going to be based on the A Aeolian mode, or A natural minor, all white keys on the piano. And our home base, harmonically, is the root position A minor triad, as you can see in example A. With this as our starting point, we're going to investigate the concept of a drop 2 voicing, a triad voicing, and we're also going to look at suspensions or appoggiaturas. Maybe it's best to call them non-chord tones. We'll talk about that more as we go. This basic chord is fine as far as it goes, and there are lots of classical guitar pieces that start with this. There's an aguado piece, for example, that starts with this very chord. But often, putting a little more space between the notes of a triad opens it up on the instrument, and it makes it more resonant and full. And so what we're going to do in these exercises is we're going to use a drop 2 voicing. Now let's build this in stages. You can see I have the A minor triad, and I lower the C down an octave to create this chord. We could call this A minor / C, first inversion. Now, if I move each of these notes up to their next chord tone, so the third goes up to an E, the A goes up to a C, and the E goes up to an A, now I have a second inversion A minor chord, A minor / E, but still that spacing, drop 2 spacing, is what we're working with. If I move it up to the root position chord, now I have this chord, A, E, C, and this is a root position chord, but it's a little high up the neck, so I drop all of those notes down an octave, and finally we get to this chord, A, This is an A minor chord with a drop 2 spacing. This is going to be our chord, sort of our home chord, our tonic chord for all of the exercises I'll show you. Now, we're going to go on to example B, and we're going to look at all of the chords within the harmonized scale, A Aeolian, A natural minor. But what I've done is I've organized them according to the circle of fourths. So the roots of the chords, the first chord A minor, the next chord would be D minor. The roots are going up a fourth, but I'm retaining common tones. If that is not something you're familiar with, don't worry about it too much. Just know that I'm moving from harmony to harmony through the scale, and the root of each harmony is up a fourth within the scale. The voicings I've chosen, these voicings in example B, these voicings retain the common tones as I move from harmony to harmony. In other words, if a note doesn't have to move, we don't move it, we keep it the same. And this establishes a good skeletal harmonic progression and framework for the work that we're going to do with non-chord tones. So here's example B again. I'll arpeggiate it. Some of you might be familiar with something like the rule of the octave in partimenti. This is not necessarily the same thing, but it's hinting at that sort of progression. This is just a basic harmonic palette for A aeolian. All of the diatonic chords within the key, again, organized to according to the circle of fourths. Now, let's look at example C, the first line of example C. Here, what's happening is, wherever there's a root, wherever the root is in each of the chords that we saw previously, I've preceded that root with a diatonic ninth. So in the case of the A minor chord, our root is on the low string. And so we put a ninth in its place for a moment. I use the term suspension in more of a casual way. We could call these appoggiaturas because of the way that they're prepared or not prepared. I'm not being too strict with my definition here. I'm just going to call this a 9/8 suspension. Think of it like the A minor chord is happening, but for a moment the root is suspended and the ninth is in its place. Now in the next example, the chord itself, D minor, has its root on the second string, and so it's this note up on top that we're going to suspend. So far we have this. I'll do one more. The third chord is a G chord, G over B. Its root is in the inner string, and I'm going to play the suspension accordingly on that inner string. Here are the first three chords. So the lower voice suspended, the upper voice, and then the inner voice suspended. This is just, my thinking can be just like in example B, where I just think of the triads, the voice-led triads through the circle of fourths, but now I've added the extra layer of thinking about the suspension, the 9/8 suspension. Let me play the whole example C for you so you can hear the 9/8 suspension through the progression. It sounds like this. Now, I can do a variety of different fingerings for these. I just improvised the fingering there. I've intentionally left the fingerings out of the picture because there are so many possibilities with just three voices. So I would encourage you to explore these from the standpoint of fingerings and see if you can find some solutions that you like more or less. Now, let's go to the second line, C, this example C, but the second line. This time we have the same chord progression, but this time the suspension happens on the fourth. So the 4 suspends down and then resolves to the third. The third is temporarily replaced by the fourth in each chord, would sound like this. This is the third line of C with a 6/5 suspension on each harmony. Some of these chords on the downbeat where the suspension occurs form triads that you're familiar with, but we're hearing them in the context of the chord symbol, and so I'm preferring to just label them with the chord symbol label and to hear the downbeat as like the altered chord symbol. Let me give you an example that's a little unclear. The second to last chord in that example, the E minor chord, is suspended with this flat 6, C. This is really a first inversion C major chord. But I'm hearing the resolution of C to E minor, C to B. So I hear that as an E minor chord, not as C major to E minor. Another example would be the very last chord, where you've got, really this is an F major triad, F, C, A, but I'm hearing it like an A minor chord with the 6/5 resolution. Okay, so that was systematically going through 9/8, 4/3, and 6/5 suspensions, all of those examples under C. With example D, what we're doing is we're maintaining a consistent voice in which the suspensions occur, and the suspensions are going to be changing. Let me play the first example, D, so you can get a taste of that. So here, this will be a 9/8 suspension, and then it becomes really a 6/5 suspension on D minor, and then here it becomes a 4/3 suspension on G major, etc. Let me play example D, the first line of D for you. And so on. The second example, second line of D, example D, now I'm suspending just the upper voice. And the suspensions start as a 4/3 suspension, then it's a 9/8 suspension, then it's a 6/5, then it's a 4/3, 9/8, 6/5, 4/3, and 9/8. And finally, the last example, the third line of D, suspends the inner voice of each of the triads, like this. Now, this video is really preparatory. It's to help you understand the concept of the drop 2 spacing, understand how we voice lead the triads through the cycle of fourths, and then to help you gain facility with adding 9/8, 4/3, and 6/5 suspensions on all of those chords. What this is going to do for you is it's going to start to liquefy your thinking a little bit. Not thinking so much when you improvise about static vertical chord voicings that you switch, you're sort of changing scenes from one vertical sonority to another, maybe connecting it with scales or some interval patterns or something. This is to think about 3 voices that can move at any time in any direction, and that also that you can sort of have a goal, harmonic goal, and you can create a sense of dramatic tension and release through using suspensions. So this is the first installment of Triads in Motion. In the next installment, we're going to talk about double suspensions on these same structures. And I think as we progress, you're going to see how this is going to open up a lot of possibilities for your improvisation, but also when you look at music of the classical and romantic era in particular, but also music for the guitar really through the ages, all the way through Villalobos, Brouwer. You're going to start to see how a lot of these structures are present, and that this is the way that composers kind of take a skeletal structure and embellish it in their own unique way. But there's an underlying kind of grammar to the harmony that is maybe something more approximating our example B of block chords, voice-led, with all kinds of these tensions and things, melodic patterns introduced. I hope you found that interesting and useful. I'm gonna now go on, split this video, and see me on Triads in Motion episode 2 for double suspensions.